Where today we are going to be continuing our free agency prediction videos, where today we are going to be going over the receiver and tight end position. Last video, if you haven't seen it, make sure to check that out. We talked about the top quarterback and running back free agents, and now we're going to talk about, as I said, receivers and tight ends. And I won't waste any more time. Let's get into these predictions. So the first guy we have is Christian Kirk. He had a solid year on Houston, nothing too crazy. Now he got utilized a little more when injuries started happening, mainly to Nico Collins. And he had that really good playoff game against Pittsburgh where he had 140 something yards. And he was really the only key piece on that Houston receiver room because I don't think they had Nico Collins. I'm not sure. I don't think he goes back to Houston because they have Nico Collins, they have Jaden Higgins, they have Jalen Noel, and maybe even Tank Dell can finally come back and be healthy. So I don't think Christian Kirk is going to go back to Houston. So I'm just looking through teams that could use a cheap depth receiver. And one team that came to mind that really doesn't have a lot outside of their top guy, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have DK Metcalf. They have young, intriguing piece of Calvin Austin, and maybe they could draft a receiver. I've constantly mocked them, Denzel Boston, in my mock draft, so maybe they go that way. But I feel like regardless if they add a receiver in the draft, early on, late in the draft, whatever, it would be valuable for them, whoever their quarterback is going to be, to just have an extra guy to throw to that's not DK Metcalf. Funny enough, Christian Kirk, his 144 yard or however many yards it was playoff game that I mentioned was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So maybe Pittsburgh saw Christian Kirk have a really good game against them. They see he's a free agent and they sign him like, oh, he did that against us. He could do that on our team. So I think this is a good fit for Christian Kirk. As I've said before, these aren't really where I think they'll go. Some of them are, but it's more of I just think this is a good fit and I think it makes sense, and it's just where I'm predicting these guys sign. Next is Keenan Allen. He obviously played his whole career on the Chargers. Then he goes to Chicago for a year. Doesn't work the best, and then he just goes back to the Chargers. And that kind of signified to me that he just wants to play for the Chargers for the rest of his career. Who knows? He might retire. That's a very real possibility. But when he plays for the Chargers for so long, goes to the Bears, and after 1 year immediately leaves back to the Chargers, I find it hard to believe that he plays for another team, not the Chargers. So I'm going to have Keenan Allen go right back to the Chargers. They need Keenan Allen. It's just McConkey and Quentin Johnston out there at receiver. And Keenan Allen's not the same Keenan Allen we know, but he's still a reliable receiver. He still has great chemistry with Justin Herbert. Probably part of the reason why he wanted to play for the Chargers again is because he likes playing with Justin Herbert. Not that Caleb Williams is bad or anything, but he has that chemistry with Justin Herbert, and it makes him a little bit better than maybe he actually is if he were to play for another team, like when he played for Chicago. So I just think it makes sense if he still plays next year, to just go back to the Chargers. He's not going to be expensive for the Chargers. I just think they have some money to spend, but he's not going to cost them a lot of money. They could use some depth, especially with maybe McConkey not having the best year too, Quentin Johnston still being up and down. Getting a reliable veteran like Keenan Allen is still useful for the Chargers. Next is Deebo Samuel. Similar to the Keenan Allen, played his whole career on one team in San Fran. Then he has all the disputes over there in San Francisco, gets traded to Washington, and now he's a free agent, which is why I didn't really mind the trade from Washington's perspective, because he was an expiring contract. So if it didn't work out, they could just let him walk. I could see them bringing Deebo back. I mean, they didn't really get to see what it would be like for Deebo to be in the offense because Jaden Daniels was always injured, and the offense overall just wasn't as good. So we didn't get to see the full impact of the Deebo acquisition. But I am going to have Deebo leave because as I was looking at potential landing spots for some of these players, one thing I saw was Deebo Samuel to the Dolphins. First of all, every NFL player I feel like wants to play in Miami just because it's Miami. And I'm pretty sure when I was looking at it, the Dolphins' new offensive coordinator was had some position on the Niners offensive staff. I think it was pass game coordinator. When in 2021, when Deebo Samuel literally had the best season of his career. Now, obviously, I don't think Deebo is the same player that he was in 2021, but him going to Miami would be going to an offense that he knows he can produce in. So I think after seeing that, I feel like it made perfect sense. And that's such a good fit for Deebo if he were to leave for Washington. And again, you get to play in Miami. Who knows who their quarterback's going to be? It could be a wide range of players because I don't think it's going to be Tua. But they need receiver help because outside of Jalen Waddle, it's Malik Washington is outside of it's he's Malik Washington is the only guy they have outside of Jalen Waddle. So I think getting a guy like Deebo, your offensive coordinator, has familiarity with him. He can provide you a lot if used correctly. I think it's a good fit. And I agree with whatever article I found that. Wish I knew where it came from. But next guy is Rashid Shaheed. I'm going to keep this simple and short. I think he goes back to Seattle. He gets traded from New Orleans to Seattle at the deadline last year. It works out great. He has all those kick return and returns and punt returns. Didn't do a ton in like the pass game, but that's obviously not his specialty. He could still be good receiver in the pass game. He's definitely more his skill set is valued most at the return game. But he had such a good stint second half with Seattle. He won a Super Bowl with them. He's not going to cost a ton of money. If I'm Rashid Shaheed, unless another team is going to pay me an insane contract, I don't know why I would leave Seattle, and I don't think a team is going to significantly overpay for Rashid Shaheed, so I think he just ends up back in Seattle. Next guy is Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings is interesting because he's just like a possession. His main thing is that he's like a possession receiver, right? He doesn't have a. He's not necessarily the biggest like after catch guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's just a. He'll get open and he'll catch the ball, and he's pretty solid at it. He had a good year in San Fran the last 2 seasons. But it was kind of hard for me to find where Jauan could go because when you look at all the teams that could use receivers and could sign some of the big receivers, it's teams like Washington, Buffalo, Tennessee, the Raiders, the Patriots, the Giants, Pittsburgh. But I feel like those teams are going to prioritize signing some of the bigger name free agents and not going after a slightly older possession receiver. So I could see a world where Jauan Jennings' market isn't as enticing as maybe he would want. And I could honestly see him just going back to San Fran. He's played well there. They don't have a lot at receiver, right? It's just Ricky Pearsall pretty much, and I guess maybe Kendrick Bourne, but he might be a free agent, and then Demarcus Robinson are their receivers from last year, not named Jauan Jennings. They need help at that receiver position. They might be able to get Jauan Jennings on a slightly cheaper contract than maybe they think because these other teams go after the bigger name free agents and spend more money on other guys, that the Niners can get Jauan on a pretty solid contract just to bring him back because they just need receivers. And if you can get Jauan on a solid contract, I think it makes sense to just keep him in San Fran. Next guy is Wan'Dale Robinson. I like Wan'Dale Robinson as a young, intriguing player over the last few years for the Giants. And I could very well see him going back to the Giants, similar to the Niners. They need help at receiver, but he's going to cost a little bit more, and he might get a little more. He might have a little more interest from other teams just because he has a little bit of upside, more upside than Jauan Jennings. So I could see the Giants having more competition in trying to bring back Wan'Dale than a San Fran would have with Jauan Jennings. But I do think he's gonna leave because there's gonna be better teams he can go to than play with the Giants. Obviously, you got Jackson Dart, you got some good pieces there in New York, but I'm gonna have him go to the Patriots. Patriots have a ton of money still. They were just in the Super Bowl. They need a lot of help at receiver. If you're Wan'Dale Robinson and the Patriots offer you a good contract, a better contract than you're gonna get with the Giants, would you rather play for the Giants on a certain contract or play for the Patriots on a more expensive contract than what the Giants are offering you, I would go to the Patriots. The Patriots have the money. Another team that could splurge on the top guys, maybe even be in the A.J. Brown trade sweepstakes. I don't have A.J. Brown on this video because I don't think he gets traded. It could still happen, but if I were to lean him getting traded or not traded, I would lean towards he doesn't get traded. So I'm not factoring in A.J. Brown. If A.J. Brown's not on the market, because I think his number one destination would be the Patriots if he gets traded. I think the Patriots look elsewhere, add to the receiver room, and get some youth too instead of just bringing in veterans like Stephon Diggs or bringing in a Jawan Jennings or a Debo or a Keenan Allen or a Mike Evans. Maybe they go the more young route and get a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson. Next up is Mr. Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to say this first. I think Romeo Doubs ends up leaving the Packers. They have such a crowded receiver room with Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, obviously Romeo Doubs, who's a free agent. And they don't have no money, but right now they don't have tons of money. So I can easily see them getting outpriced on a guy like Romeo Doubs. Not only would Romeo Doubs potentially get a lot more money from another team, but he'll also get a lot more opportunities on another team. And I just think that might be too much for a guy like Romeo Doubs to pass up on. And a team that fits that has a lot more opportunities than Green Bay does. They have tons of money, a big hole at receiver, so they might be willing to spend a lot of money on Romeo Doubs. And they have an intriguing young quarterback that they are likely about to add. That's the Las Vegas Raiders. At receiver, it's Jack Beck and Trey Tucker. They have some of the most cap space in the league. They have an exciting new head coach in Clint Kubiak coming over from Seattle. You got Fernando Mendoza. I think Romeo Doubs ends up getting priced out by the Packers and goes to a team like the Raiders, and I'm going to say he goes to the Raiders. Next guy who's in a similar spot is Alec Pierce, a guy that could get outpriced by some of these teams with a lot more money than the Colts, especially considering the Colts have a decision to make with Daniel Jones. They basically have Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce. They could franchise tag one, extend the other, extend both. I doubt both walk. I think the Colts would be stupid to not at least franchise tag one of them. So I think at least one of Alec Pierce or Daniel Jones is going to be on the Colts. If you saw my quarterback prediction video, I did have Daniel Jones going back to the Colts. I don't know how, because again, they could franchise tag one, extend the other. But I have Daniel Jones going back to the Colts, and I also have Alec Pierce going back to the Colts. He had his best season on the Colts. He had his best season with Daniel Jones at quarterback, even though he's making plays with Phillip Rivers, even Riley Leonard was even making plays with them. But he had his best year on the Colts last year. And now they might not have the money to extend Alec Pierce and bring back Daniel Jones or whatnot. But part of the reason they might be able to make up that money is by getting rid of Michael Pittman. I like Michael Pittman Jr., but I feel like if you're going to bring in Alec Pierce in a crowded, and not necessarily crowded receiver room, but you have Josh Downs, you have Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce became the number one guy, it feels like, in Indy, and he overtook Michael Pittman's spot. And the only realistic way potentially for Indianapolis to bring back Alec Pierce and bring back Daniel Jones is to move on from Michael Pittman. So I'm going to have my prediction of Alec Pierce going to the Colts is going to also include Michael Pittman leaving the Colts. And similar to Doubs, I think he goes to one of those teams with a ton of money, an intriguing quarterback, and not a lot of competition at the receiver room. And that is the division rival Tennessee Titans. Similar to the Raiders, they have tons of money. Michael Pittman, in this hypothetical, will probably get cut by the Colts. He can go to a division rival, play the Colts twice a year, get a ton of money, play with a very good young quarterback in Cam Ward. And similar to Doubs, the only piece that the Titans probably care about at the receiver room that would that would get in the way of targets for Pittman is Alec A.O. Manor. But regardless, I think if the Titans are paying Michael Pittman, they're going to give him the ball. So I'm going to have Michael Pittman not only get released, but also go to the Titans. Next is Tyreek Hill. Recently, like a week or two ago, a week and a half ago, however long it was, got released by Miami. We knew it was likely going to happen coming off the injury, making a ton of money. The the relationship between Tyreek and the Dolphins wasn't all that great towards the end of his tenure there in Miami. So it was we all knew he was going to get cut, but it finally happened like a week or two ago, however long that was. And I think everyone's going to assume, like, if everyone's predicting where Tyreek's going to go, I feel like a lot of people are going to say this team, myself included, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it just makes too much sense. Travis Kelce comes back for a year, doesn't retire. Mahomes comes back within, I mean, he might come back week one, but for this sake, we'll just say like within the first 4 weeks. Tyreek Hill's back on the team on a slightly cheaper deal. They bring Eric Bieniemy back, their old offensive coordinator. I think it just makes way too much sense for Tyreek to go back, Travis Kelce to stay, Bieniemy to come back, Mahomes to be healthy, for them to have one last ride as a offense together. The Chiefs do need some help at receiver. Outside of Rashee Rice and James Worthy, they need somebody else. And obviously, Tyreek is still really good in my opinion. We'll see how he can recover from his injury. But I feel like regardless, if they can get him on a slightly cheaper contract because he is old, he might not be playing for much longer. It would just be a cool story to have all three of those guys, and even again, Bieniemy come back for one last season. So I'm just going to assume this is the consensus, Tyreek to the Chiefs. I'm going to agree, and I do think he goes to the Chiefs. Next up is Mike Evans. When I found out Mike Evans was a free agent, when we were looking at free agents and you see Mike Evans is a free agent, I'm like, he's just going to go back to the Buccaneers. But now it seems like he might actually end up leaving. And just for fun, just to spice things up, I am going to have Mike Evans leave. Although he just feels like such a Buccaneer that I don't. It seems weird to picture him in a jersey that's not a Buccaneers jersey, a Bucks jersey. But just for the sake of this video, I am going to have him leave just to mix things up. And I feel like there's two or three two destinations that make sense for Mike Evans if he leaves Tampa. That's the Bills and that's the Niners. I think he'll want to go to a contender. Those two teams are contenders. I don't know why San Fran comes to mind, but I feel like Buffalo just makes so much sense, right? You have the really good quarterback in Josh Allen. You're competing for a championship in Buffalo. Not that Tampa can't win a championship, but I just don't think so. They got their one with Tom Brady, but I feel like obviously Buffalo has a much better chance of winning a championship. I don't think he'd go to Pittsburgh. I don't think he'd go to Miami. He could go to Washington. Washington was another team that crossed my mind. Patriots as well. But again, I don't know if the Patriots want to do the aging route again. Right? Do you want to bring in Stephon Diggs one off season, then Mike Evans the next? I don't know. So I'm going to have him go to the Buffalo Bills. You get the good quarterback. You can compete for a championship. The Bills can have Mike Evans mentor Keon Coleman because they kind of have a similar play style. Obviously, Mike Evans is significantly better than Keon Coleman. We all know that, but they're the tall, physical jump ball receivers. So maybe that could be good for Keon Coleman's development to bring in a guy like Mike Evans. So I think it makes sense for him to go to the Bills. And also he gets a little bit of fresh, not that he needs a change of scenery, but he goes to a different conference. And maybe if what happens last year happens again, where the AFC is kind of wide open, maybe Mike Evans and the Bills can have a chance to make the Super Bowl. Next up we have is Brandon Aiyuk. The graphic got messed up. I have him going to Washington. It feels so obvious that he goes to Washington, right? Didn't end well in San Fran by any means. Washington has a ton of money. They don't bring back Deebo in my predictions. And he gets to reunite with his former college teammate Jayden Daniels. Yes, Brandon Aiyuk and Jayden Daniels, I'm pretty sure, played college together and they were drafted like 3 years apart, whatever it was, 4 years apart. I just think it makes perfect sense. Change of this is a guy who needs a change of scenery. That's speaking of change of scenery. Brandon Ayuk needs a change of scenery, and he can get that change of scenery while also having familiarity with the quarterback, Jayden Daniels. And I still think Brandon Ayuk's a good receiver. We'll have to see. It's been a really long time since we've seen Brandon Ayuk play football, so I'm kind of excited to see him back on the field. And I think it just makes perfect sense for him to go to Washington. And the last guy is George Pickens. Now, this video is being filmed before any news on a George Pickens extension or franchise tag. As I'm recording this video, I do not know if George Pickens has been extended or franchise tagged, but I just think regardless, he's going to go back to the Cowboys. It worked out way too well. They made the trade for George Pickens, and it was a perfect match. He had an amazing season. Him, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb were phenomenal. One of the better quarterback, receiver trios in the NFL. I just have a hard time feeling like the Cowboys let George Pickens leave. Even if it's just a franchise tag and then maybe he leaves after that, I think he's playing the next season with the Dallas Cowboys. And that concludes our receivers. Now moving on to the tight ends. We have 7 tight ends to go through. First up is Cade Otton from the Buccaneers. Every single tight end on this list outside of David Njoku and Isaiah Likely, I think could stay on their team. So it was really hard to find out which tight ends would leave their team, which tight ends would move on. There's like a list of, there's basically, it feels like a set of like 7, 8 teams that could go after a tight end, whether that's they're bringing back their former tight end or adding a new one. And it was kind of hard to feel like if Cade Otton was going to come back. It feels like he had his worst year in Tampa. Like he just wasn't getting talked about enough as he was the last year or two, the previous 1 to 2 seasons. So I think it's gonna be Cade Otton's time to leave Tampa Bay, and I'm gonna have him reuniting with an old friend and going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He probably had his best season with Liam Cohen as his offensive coordinator. Now Liam Cohen is the coach of the Jags. They were really good. Trevor Lawrence is really good. They need help at tight end outside of Brenton Strange. They don't really have a lot. Cade Otton's a really solid tight end, and he has familiarity with the offense. I think it's a pretty good match if he leaves Tampa to go and reunite with Liam Cohen. Next, we have Chigoziem Okonkwo, I think is his full name, from the Titans. I like Okonkwo, Okonkwo, however you want to, whatever you want to call him by. Young tight end on the Titans. I could very well see the Titans not bringing him back because they have Gunnar Helm. They might want Gunnar Helm to be the focal tight end, and they don't want to pay Okonkwo money. But in my opinion, I don't think he's going to cost a ton. He didn't have a step up season, the caliber of increase in play that maybe Titans fans wanted. And again, the Titans have so much money that they can outbid anybody on Okonkwo. The only team that might have more money than them is the Raiders. They're not going to be in the Okonkwo market, that's for sure. So while I could see them letting Okonkwo walk if another team pays him a lot of money and they want to have Gunnar Helm be the number 1 tight end, I think maybe similar to like Jawan Jennings, kind of. I think he just goes back to the Titans. I think he looks at other teams, and then 3 days into free agency, it's just like, all right, I'm just going to come back to the Titans, have a year 2 with Cam Ward, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. I think Brian Daboll's the offensive coordinator. Could be wrong. So I think he just ends up going back to the Titans. Next is Isaiah Likely. He was one of the names I mentioned that I do think there's a very, very high chance he leaves. He's just never been able to be that focal tight end because of Mark Andrews. And he's had good years on Baltimore despite not being the clear number 1 tight end. But I feel like he's finally a free agent. He's still young, and this is his chance to get a big contract with a new team and be that number one tight end that he hasn't been able to be with Baltimore. Because not only if he stays in Baltimore, he's not the number one tight end, but I also don't think he'll make as much money going back to Baltimore as he would going to a different team, on top of being the number one tight end. And a team that has money, needs, massively needs an upgrade at tight end, and is also competing and trying to be really good and is a really good team, is the Washington Commanders. They have old man Zach Ertz. I don't even know if Zach Ertz is a free agent or not. They have tons of money. I think they're like currently like top five ish in cap space still. They need help on offense, especially in that pass game. I know Jayden Daniels wasn't the healthiest last year, but even when he was healthy, it wasn't the best offense. It wasn't the offense we saw from Jayden Daniels' rookie year. Isaiah Likely is a really good tight end. And the reason I think they go after Likely instead of a guy like David Njoku or Kyle Pitts is because of the blocking that Isaiah Likely can give them. Unlike a guy like Kyle Pitts, the number one tight end free agent. I also think Kyle Pitts is going to stay in Atlanta too. We'll talk about that. But the reason why I think Likely's blocking skill is going to be so valued in Washington is because how well and how much they run the ball. Jayden Daniels obviously can run the ball. And we saw last year when Jayden Daniels was out and Mariota was at quarterback, they still were a very good rushing offense with Chris Rodriguez, Jeremy McNichols, Bill Krosky Merritt. It was a very good running attack. So to get Isaiah Likely's blocking ability thrown in there with his pass catching, I think will be a reason why the Commanders prioritize him at a little bit of a cheaper deal than giving Kyle Pitts the top tight end money of this offseason. Next guy is Dallas Goedert of the Eagles. Similar to, I don't know if similar, but I just don't see him leaving. Similar to Mike Evans, I just think, I know I kind of spiced it up with Mike Evans, had him leave Tampa Bay because there were reports that he could leave Tampa Bay and that he might actually look towards moving on. I haven't really seen that about Dallas Goedert. He's been on the Eagles for so long. He's also getting up there in age. So it might not be the most expensive thing. I'm just gonna have Dallas Goedert go back to Philly. I think it makes sense. I don't know why Philly wouldn't move on from him. They could draft Kenyon Sadiq in the first round of the draft. There's also other tight ends they could target in the draft in the second or third round. But even if they take a tight end, why not bring Dallas Goedert back? He, again, I don't think he's going to cost them a ton to bring him back, especially if the Eagles are bringing him back. I don't think it'll cost a lot of money. And he could be a good development, a good mentor for a young tight end if they so. Because I do think they should get a young tight end in the offseason, whether it's the draft or free agency, as the next Dallas Goedert. But I don't see why Dallas Goedert doesn't play at least one more year in Philly. Next is David Njoku, another guy that I think one of the two tight ends, him and Likely, I think is for sure going to switch teams. And that's just because he got his spot taken by Harold Fannin. Harold Fannin had an amazing rookie season. The Browns really like Harold Fannin. I really like Harold Fannin. I don't see why they don't make him the number one tight end. And I think that does leave Njoku to being on a different team next season, especially because I think he's going to want to get paid by a different team. And a team that could use some tight end help, I saw as I was doing a little bit of research that this team is going to try and get one of the top tight ends, and that is the New York Giants. You have the young, intriguing quarterback in Jackson Dart. I know Jackson Dart built a pretty good connection with Theo Johnson. That doesn't mean you can't have David Njoku and Theo Johnson. I still think David Njoku is a really good tight end. I just think it makes more sense for the Browns to focus on developing Harold Fannin than keeping a guy like David Njoku around. But the Giants don't have a Harold Fannin, so I think it's a great pickup to add a guy like David Njoku. They need some more playmakers on offense. You have Cam Skattebo. You have Malik Neighbors. In this case, you don't have Wan'Dale Robinson anymore. You need some playmakers. David Njoku is one of the better tight ends on the market. I think it makes sense. Next guy, Travis Kelce. I actually think Travis Kelce retires. Now, as I mentioned before, if they get Tyreek Hill, I think Travis Kelce's chances of staying significantly increase, to have that one last year with him, Mahomes, and Tyreek Hill. So if Tyreek Hill goes to the Chiefs, I think Travis Kelce plays one more year with the Chiefs. I think that'd be the reason Tyreek Hill is going to the Chiefs is because Kelce stays, and the reason Kelce comes back for a year is because Tyreek Hill is coming. Whatever. But if Tyreek Hill does not go back to the Chiefs, I actually do think Travis Kelce retires. However, if he does not retire, regardless of Tyreek Hill coming back or not, I think he goes back to the Chiefs. There's just no way Travis Kelce is playing another year and playing it on a different team. To me, he's either coming back another year because he wants to play one more year on the Chiefs, or he retires. He's not gonna not retire and then play one season on the Giants or one season on, I don't know, the Jaguars. I don't think, or the Buccaneers. I don't think that's gonna happen. It's either retirement or the Chiefs. And because of my Tyreek Hill prediction to the Chiefs, I'm also gonna have Travis Kelce play one more season in the NFL, obviously on the Chiefs. And then our final guy, Kyle Pitts. Similar to George Pickens, this video is being filmed before any franchise tag or extension notification. The Falcons, by the time this video comes out on Wednesday, could have placed the franchise tag on Kyle Pitts, but I have no idea. They could have extended Kyle Pitts, but I have no idea. However, similar to George Pickens, I do think they bring him back. When I was looking at salary caps and teams that could use tight ends, the only team that could outbid Kyle Pitts easily, or the Falcons easily for Kyle Pitts, that could use a big upgrade at tight end was the Commanders. But not only do I not think the Falcons are going to let Kyle Pitts leave, whether that's franchise tag or extension, because of how good of a season he had, but I think they could just, I don't think the Commanders, I think they prioritize a guy like Isaiah Likely. And again, Pitts might not even hit the market. The Falcons could franchise tag him, but regardless, I think he at least plays similar to George Pickens next season once again on the Falcons. And that will conclude our free agency predictions for tight ends and receivers. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below where you think some of these guys are going to play next season. And if you like the content over here, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Helps the channel out a lot. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.